So sorry for the long wait on this one. I probably shouldn't have put something out called Part 1 and then make Part 2 months later, but this wasn't really a priority for me, just with other stuff going on. But now we are here, and I am ready for Part 2 of my SMT1 review. Now, here I'm going to be talking, mostly just going through the plot and then bringing up stuff I just want to talk about. But I guess before we do that, there is one thing I do want to talk about, and that is something that this game helped me realize as a video game fan. Uh, just overall, as a video game player, there's a moment I had during one of my playthroughs of this game where I realized something about myself. And this is something that I realized maybe not even just about myself as a fan of video games, but just as a consumer of media in general. And that is, I am a very concept driven person. Now, what I mean by this is if I'm experiencing anything and it has a very unique or just creative or fresh feeling concept or just something that grabs me with just the ideas presented, but the execution isn't always there. I tend to be very forgiving in that regard, as long as they kind of sort of get it right, or even if the execution is just okay. I tend to be very forgiving when it comes to that because I can let my mind wrap around the ideas and have fun with it that way. Um, which I think too, in a way, with older SMT stuff, I think a lot of fans of older SMT are the same with they realize that it's not always executed properly, but just because of the ideas and the creativity expressed, it's kind of a fun experience to go back to. So that's what this game helped me realize. Now, the rest of this video is just going to be me talking about stuff in the plot. So if you care about spoilers and haven't played SMT1 yet, then you should probably click away. But it's time for me to talk about the opening of the game. So, one thing that I really want to talk about with the intro that I think a lot of people miss, or maybe I'm just thinking too hard about it. I really think this game is trying to give you a false sense of security just in terms of what people know, in terms of JRPG beginnings and tropes and whatnot. It's kind of. You start with this dream segment where you name all the characters and just kind of this prophetic vision that seems pretty similar to a lot of other stuff at the time. It's just kind of a fairly standard JRPG start, and then the character gets woken up by their mom, and you go from there type of thing. It's really samey to a lot of other stuff at the time, and what I really think they're trying to do there is bring new people that aren't familiar with the franchise yet. And I mean, I'm sure at the time not many people were, with there only being two games out prior that I don't even know how many people played. Um, it makes me feel that they're just trying to set you up to kind of fuck with you later on with when shit hits the fan. And speaking of when shit hits the fan, next thing I want to talk about is the demon attack and just how kind of out of nowhere that happens because depending on who you talk to, even when you go into the mall or the mall arcade, whatever you want to call it, in the beginning of the game, you might not even know that there's a crazy guy in the back of that area. You might just walk into it and see a guy with a knife freaking out about demons and then getting his throat ripped out. Uh, Kind of a shocking moment, and again, the presentation isn't really there. He just kind of blinks away, and there's some flavor text about the demon attacking. Then you see the demon sprite, and it attacks you, and it just kind of runs away, and you lose a bit of HP. Uh, Once again, cool idea, and just the presentation, given the limitations they had at the time, I still find that moment to be very, very powerful in a way, just because it comes kind of out of nowhere in this very, very, I guess, this very down to earth world that was set up so far with your mom just going out and telling you to get coffee. The next thing you know, there's a guy getting mauled by a demon. um, uh, even though the presentation isn't there, I really think that is a good moment. And then I guess a little bit after that, you meet oh god, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. I am so sorry. Taishang Laojun, or Taishang Laojun. Now, I guess you don't really know who he is other than some weird old guy that seems to be magical at this point in the game, but he is a Taoist figure, which I think is very interesting because it's kind of just an underused thing, even in Megaten, which usually is pretty good with drawing from everywhere. But I find that interesting at least because Taoism has at least some elements of duality and balance, which kind of I think it's cool that the first Mega 10 game to have a element of neutrality to it also has sort of that Taoist belief in there, and that those themes going on with the sense of balance and the duality between two different opposing forces. Next, you get arrested and you meet Law Hero, who I guess I'll use both the characters and their introductions to kind of talk about them a bit. I really like Law Hero because he's not really like other law representatives, at least from what I've experienced in mainline, where Law Hero you really wouldn't think would turn on you, at least not in the traditional sense, because he really does seem to be your honest to God friend, and he doesn't really seem to care too much about what the Messians are doing or that entire law side until later on, where he dies and comes back, which kind of makes me think that at first he really isn't even law aligned. He's just kind of a nice dude with maybe some hints of law belief, but I honestly think that Yahweh or the angels or something happened after he died where he got either convinced or brainwashed into working for them, which you don't really see very often. But I do like this because sometimes in SMT it's kind of hard to have the main character's friends feel like friends, because going in you kind of know that you're going to kill them. But the thing with Law Hero is he's a nice dude, and he's nice to you throughout pretty much the entire beginning section of the game. He feels like someone that will actually befriend you and fight with you until the very end, but things go sour with that later on. So I kind of wish, maybe in one of the more modern mainline games or something, we get another Law Hero-esque character like that, because he really does feel like a friend, and that makes the turning points all the more worrying and hard as a player when you actually have to put him down. And then we get to meet Kaos Hero, who is one of my favorite characters in all of Megami Tensei, maybe my absolute favorite. Wow, what a great character. His arc is very simple, but I just love how he is handled in this game. In a game that's actually fairly light on story, he is very interesting to look into. Now, one thing that I guess Kaos Hero always reminds me about, or another character that Kaos Hero reminds me of, if anyone is familiar with the Stephen King book, or maybe you watch the TV miniseries The Stand, there's a character in that, now that I want to talk about him, I forgot his name. But basically, if anyone remembers, there's that one kind of nerdy kid who got bullied a lot and is just kind of really socially awkward. And after the apocalypse happens, that character kind of tries to act like a street thug or like a punk to kind of compensate for the fact that he was bullied, and to make himself feel like he's cool and whatever. That's exactly who Kaos Hero reminds me of. That character from The Stand who... Oh God! Someone in the comments, please post his name if you know it. I should probably look it up, but fuck it, not that important. But yeah, that basically describes Kaos Hero in the early part for a nutshell. He seems to be harassed a lot by the other people his age, at least the little street thugs in that group that he hangs out with, and you kind of feel bad for him, but at the same time, he's kind of a dick. It really doesn't seem like he's tagging along with you because he likes you, so much so because it'll let him get some personal revenge. He's kind of just around because he wants to kick Ozawa's ass, and I don't really think he gives a shit too much about what happens to Tokyo as long as he can get back at the people who bullied him. which already is fairly interesting. But then later on, when he fuses himself with the demon, oh my god, that is such a great moment because it's pretty much his. I love that scene simply because it's him saying, "I don't fucking care if I'm a human or not. I just want to be strong, and this world is fucking run by demons anyways. Why don't I become at least like one so I can become powerful and just do whatever the fuck I want?" Uh, to which he basically says, "Fuck you guys, I'm done. You guys are kind of trash. I'm 10 levels above you, gameplay wise, and I'm just gonna go do my own thing. So fuck you too. I'm gone." I really love that moment. It's especially because he doesn't even use one of his own demons. He just kind of steals a demon from the party and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna fuse myself with this one." Really, really cool how that works out. And then later on too, you can see even though that he is powerful, he still is very insecure as a person because he kind of still acts like he's mad at like people that bullied him and whatnot. Except the world's gone through a nuclear holocaust and demons are all around and angels and God and Lucifer are fighting. There's a lot more important things to be worried about, but he's kind of too much of a dick to realize that. Overall, one of my favorite characters in Megaten, like I said. Wow, what a fantastic character. Just love his dialogue, love how he was written. Definitely one of the highlights of this game for me. I guess getting back on track, back to the story. So where we left off, we get to the point where the hero's mom dies, which I guess is kind of a way of showing that demons don't pull punches, or at least they're not like other monsters from like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. These demons are actually going into buildings and killing people, and they're not just really a nuisance to worry about in between locations. They are inside the city. They are cruel, and they are going to kill people just because they can, and they're fucking evil. Uh, like how that was handled. I guess skipping forward a bit, this is where we get factions introduced. And we get our first real alignment options with how we feel about Goto versus Thorman and the Americans versus the Self-Defense Force. Or even then, too, we have the Resistance, who basically the game forces you to work for, at least for a decent dungeon or two. And they are obviously the neutral party involved. So then I guess the big part of the game, and the one everyone loves to talk about, the nuclear attack. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about is playing SMT1. I really, for this beginning part of the game, I really did not know anything going in. I did not know about the nuclear attack that Thorman calls down. I was shocked. I thought I fucked up and that something was wrong. I thought I got like a game over or something. So I reloaded an earlier save, and I decided to side with Thor to kill Goto, and realized the same thing happened, and I was actually right. And see, because I had chose to kill both, on my first run through. Somehow was able to get the neutral option in that, even though I wasn't using the guide. But man, that was surprising. That was very surprising. Uh, the game just loves to play with expectations, like I said before. So I really did not see coming that the world was going to go to shit that early on in the game. Definitely one of the moments in Shin Megami Tensei, at least mainline, that will stick with me forever. I'm so glad that I didn't use a guide up to that point, because I didn't know, and it came to a point for me where I'm like, wow, that was I'm glad I got surprised by that, because I think most people going in know about that, but luckily I didn't, so that was kind of fun. So then after that happens, the heroine sends the hero and friends to Kongokai, which apparently in the iOS version it's the Diamond Realm, which actually is just basically the proper translation for Kongokai. And once again, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So I I didn't know much about what this was a reference to, so I actually had to do some digging myself, and I found something pretty cool. In Buddhism, the Diamond Realm is a symbol involved with basically disciples decide what influential figure to devote their studies to, which I actually this was brilliant to me because Kongokai is basically the alignment tutorial. It's where you first learn about alignments and where you first learn that your decisions in this game actually matter in comparison to other JRPGs. You have choice as to who you decide to and to what sort of ideology that you want to back. Uh, I also think it's worth pointing out that you get the tutorial for alignments and alignment choice after you make your first major alignment choice. So I think it's kind of neat how you may have sided with one side, or maybe you just kind of accidentally sided with an alignment you didn't mean to, and then the game explains that you can fix it, or like you can reverse it or change your mind later, but to be careful about what you do in the future. I think that's pretty neat. Then we go back to Tokyo, and I really love this part because the atmosphere is just phenomenal for a Super Nintendo game. This is one of the most atmospheric or immersive games I think I've played on Super Nintendo. Just everything is ruined, and you really just the way the dialogue and the graphics mix together and all that. It's nothing, I guess, too spectacular, but it really makes you feel like the world went to shit when you were gone. I really like that. Especially Super Nintendo, of course, has limitations with stuff like that, and it can be harder to do something grittier or more realistic like that. But I think they pulled it off well for what they had available. Then from there, a mix of stuff happens, such as saving the heroine, and it's kind of fun to see how she was brought up by the Messiahs after she was reincarnated and stuff. I also really like to see that she isn't like she was pretty much brought up by Messiahs, but she doesn't show any sort of law bias or anything. She's still loyal to the main character. Really enjoyed that. Kind of wish they explored that more, just her being raised by the Messiahs, and maybe just like a sentence or a line of dialogue or something with her saying something like, "Oh, they wanted me to convert, but fuck that," or something. Would have been nice, but I can live without it. You get Roppongi, which you get Alice and her crazy shit with the butlers. You also get Law Hero sacrificing himself and all that, which really funny how that Messenger of God character just kind of pops in during that scene, and the Law ending, he's just kind of there. Kind of makes sense for that guy to be Metatron, but I guess they didn't really have that idea set in stone by the time they made this game. Oh, and I guess, yeah, even before both of those, you get Kaos Hero fusing off with the demon, which I talked about earlier, but I already talked about that enough. Anyways, moving on, and a little bit later on, even, you learn that Law Hero got reincarnated. And once again, you get the full thing with, it's kind of ambiguous as to why exactly he decided to serve God and the Messiahs. Not really clear if he's doing it because they convinced him to, he was brainwashed, or if he was just like that the whole time, but he didn't show it. Really like the ambiguity there. A little tiny bit after that, you get captured and arrested by the Kaos Hero. They also find it funny that he takes you to trial and that the Gaians have a judicial system because they're chaotic and stuff. Like, I would think they just kind of like kill you, but whatever. I don't know. I think it's funny that they seem to have a chaotic judicial system in place that it's just weird to see something like that outside of a law setting. And then from there we go to Tokyo Destinyland, and you get Louis Cypher's first appearance. Obviously that's Lucifer, and Yuriko finally shows her full form as Lilith and all that. And you get kind of a vague mention of the whole side plot with the main character probably being the reincarnation of Adam, the heroine being the reincarnation of Eve, and obviously Yuriko is Lilith. So that kind of explains why she's so jealous and why she hates the heroine so much. I really like that little love triangle side plot just because it's kind of unexpected how it comes up, but it kind of explains the earlier points in the game with why Yuriko is kind of fucking with you and how she loves but seems to antagonize you at the same time, and she just fucking flat out hates the heroine. So that kind of explains her slightly awkward motives. Um, from there, Echidna and Haniel are killed, or Echidna or Haniel, however the fuck you're supposed to pronounce that angel name. Your alignment is basically locked at this point. I fucked around with it, and I know people say that it isn't technically locked, but messing around with the ROM and like the save game file and stuff, I truly think the alignment lock is supposed to be here because for the love of me, I could never get it to change no matter how hard I fucked around with the save games that I had. So from there, you fight the 4 barrier guardians of Tokyo. And Yahweh and Lucifer's forces are basically free to go into Tokyo as they see fit. Because the main character himself destroyed the four forces that were protecting Tokyo from too much demon or angel influence. And then from there, another scene everyone talks about, the Great Flood happens, and holy shit, I thought the nuclear thing was bad enough, but literally everyone is dead. Again, for the second time in the same game. Gotta love SMT. I guess from there too, you have the final dungeon, which is difficult and very, very intense. It really does add to the suspense and the feeling of saving the world, though, that is kind of going on, or is going on with the story at that point. No matter what side you're fighting for, you feel like there is a full-on war going on in that cathedral, just with the random encounter rate and just how complex and labyrinth it is, and just how hard it is to struggle your way through and get to either the basement or the top floor. I guess from there, right before the Chaos Heroes room, if you're on neutral or law, Lucifer tries to get you to fight Beelzebub, which I kind of read that as Lucifer kind of afraid that you're going to ruin his plans. So he says, hey, you might want to check out that island, in hopes that Beelzebub will kill the party. I find that really funny because Lucifer really doesn't seem to be able to get fully involved himself in the same way God isn't able to get fully involved himself. So I think it's funny that he's kind of trying to persuade the protagonist to go walk into a giant demon and get him killed. Would have been cooler if Beelzebub was a harder fight, because he is technically the ultimate boss of this game, but Beelzebub is pretty easy. Well, I guess he's the ultimate boss if you don't count the Fiends, but the Fiends are kind of weird and almost impossible to fight anyways, because their encounter rate is so low. I guess just another thing before the final bosses even, I really like how the Law Hero, the Chaos Hero, and Lilith are all incredibly weak. And maybe it is bad design, and probably is just bad design and improper difficulty balancing, but I find it very fitting in a way because they're basically humanoid, and they do have like supernatural powers, all 3 of them, but well, I guess Lilith is technically a full-on demon, but still, she's kind of in that humanoid-ish form. I find it funny that the fights are actually that easy because when you think about it, you have a full party of 2 humans and 4 demons backing you up, and it's just one person trying to fight back, so naturally they're going to get curb stomped. Maybe not the most climactic thing ever, and maybe a little bit boring, but I just kind of like how it feels proper given the situation. From there, when the Law Hero dies, he apologizes, and I actually found that a pretty sad moment because he kind of realizes how hard he fucked up, and he feels bad for betraying you and for siding with Yahweh and the angels at the very end there. But it's too late, and he doesn't realize it until after you've killed him, sadly, so depressing, but at least he apologized. That I respect him for that. On the other hand, the Chaos Hero basically dies not giving a fuck. What I really love about the Chaos Hero, though, is he has his final words are, I'm pretty sure, a callback to the start of the game, where every time you have one of those dream sequences with the Chaos Hero and the Law Hero, the Chaos Hero almost always comments like, oh wow, we're in another weird dream. And then when the Chaos Hero dies, you kind of get a callback to that, I feel, where the Chaos Hero says, I feel like this has all been a crazy dream. And then he says, no, maybe it was a nightmare. And then again, he doubles back and says, no, it was a good dream. And then he says, goodbye, hero. And then he dies. So you just kind of get a callback to the beginning part with all the dream stuff, and Chaos Hero kind of referencing that again. I never really hear anyone talking about that, so maybe I was just looking too deep into it. But yeah, I find I kind of like exploring Chaos Hero on the other two routes too, because in the Law route, Chaos Hero totally just kills the Law Hero and doesn't give a shit, even though they used to be friends. And then the Chaos route, Chaos Hero totally steals the Devil Ring and kills himself accidentally because he thinks he's more powerful than he actually is, and he's so out of it by that point and so insane that he doesn't understand that he's not the most powerful being in existence like he thinks he is. And from there you have the endings. Now the Law ending I don't really have much to like talk about. Chaos ending, I do want to say I find it cool that we finally see Lucifer in his true form. And his final words are very haunting. He says something equivalent to, or at least similar to, that he is a piece of Yahweh, but one that Yahweh has discarded. And then he says, what does that mean? I'm not going to tell you. And then he flies off to the moon. So really, I to this day, I don't necessarily get what he means. Maybe in a sense that Yahweh created him along with the other angels, and since he fell from grace, he's been discarded from Yahweh in a way, sort of thing, maybe. Or that Lucifer represents Yahweh's chaotic tendencies that Yahweh obviously has no use for, so he threw away or something like that. Who knows? I do, I guess, want to comment on both the final bosses, Asura Lord and Michael. Not really the most challenging, but they're still fairly long boss fights, and pretty climactic. They're a good way to end the game. Now, to talk about the neutral ending. Amazingly rewarding. One of the best feelings ever I got from beating any game. One of my favorite endings, despite how simple it is. It's basically Tao Shang Lao Jin, or I'm so sorry for pronouncing that terribly. I know I'm butchering that, but you basically just have a nice conversation with him, and that's it. Really love how simple it is, but how calming and rewarding it feels that it's finally over, and even though you've killed two sides of a war that involved many people, and there's only a very small percentage of humanity left after all of the years of fighting, it feels like it's finally time to start rebuilding, and it's time to carry on with life. Then obviously that leads into SMT2, and we all know how it goes from there. So yeah, even though on paper I think most people would say this game is bad compared to at least compared to where gaming has gone in recent years and how it's evolved over time, it's not the most fun or well-designed game ever, but I love this game. So many wonderful ideas. It's hard for me to grasp and comprehend that this was made at the same time as like Final Fantasy IV or like Dragon Quest V and all that. I mean, those games are fantastic, but this game is just so much more mature with how it handles its ideas and the themes, and it just goes places that I really think it was a generation early. This game was. It is just so in depth with how it handles the plot and the characters, and just with how far it goes with exploring what they present to the player. Really revolutionary, and it pushed what a game was able to do at the time in terms of storytelling. And I'm kind of upset that people don't. This game is kind of lost to history, but to be completely honest, I think this game is a hidden gem. I think this game had the power. If this game was slightly more polished when it had come out, I think this might have been one of the most influential games ever made in terms of RPG storytelling. And I know that might seem kind of like I'm hyping it up too much, but I honest to God believe that. Just such a greatly put together plot. despite how minimalistic it is, it goes so far compared to what everything else at the time did. And I kind of wish that people recognized it more. That being said, this game has been kind of forgotten in gaming and its vast history over the couple decades, which kind of upsets me. But hey, I played it. I know others have played it, and I think it's a amazing experience. So yeah, I guess I just want to close the review out with saying this game's fantastic. One of the most endearing, I guess, or just one of the most gripping games I've ever played. I keep coming back to it, and I don't really know why. It just has a charm to it that I can never escape. Just a wonderful experience that I think a lot of people should respect.